All right, today break still on the rise news, and it's a time for the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages of the papers. We have Emmanuel Bello later. He will join us for the press preview. But let's start with Kenneth. I think I'm starting with leadership.
That's okay.
Here, right? I'm starting with leadership. CBN bows to pressure, reviews cash withdrawal. Let's see, Somolu, Hamzat, others. Test run, Lagos Blue Rail. And just on top of that, CBN bows to pressure. APC, PDP are daggers drawn over plot to disrupt 2023 polls. And again, Ekweremadu loses bail bid to spend Christmas. Oh, such a pity. In UK prison. Let's take some other stories.
Okay, let's see. Do we have this day? If we do have this day, we can. Let's look at the other papers. This is the Punch newspaper. It says depots fuel scarcity. Depots dry up. Nigerians face bleak Christmas. Well, the fuel queues have worsened in Lagos and in other states. The market is blaming supply shortages. Emefiele, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, is about to pressure, has raised the cash limits to 500,000 naira for individuals and 5 million naira for organizations or corporate bodies. President Buhari seeks fresh 819 billion naira loan, and domestic debt hits to 22.5 trillion naira. Lack of fund halts Eastern Railway project. That's the federal government speaking.
All right, I think we have this date now. Emefiele, British Parliamentarian, 6 independent institutions ahead of 2023 elections.
And other stories, 15 years after NUPRC announces bid for 7 deep offshore oil assets. Federal government says we can no longer deliver $1.96 billion Eastern Railway corridor by May. What happened? We'll get to find out. Pick up this day. History as Sanwo-Olu completes infrastructure work on Lagos Blue Rail line. And Buhari says he's ready to campaign for the APC's candidate Bola Tinubu and other candidates in his party.
Yeah, he said that. Let's look at the Nation newspaper. The Nation newspaper, some interesting stories. You see the picture of the vice president who visited Tinubu at his home here in Abuja. Buhari seeks approval for 1 trillion naira cash advance from CBN. How Blue Light Rail will benefit Lagos? By Somolu, of course, down. You see CBN raises weekly cash withdrawal limit to 500,000 naira. And then just above the nameplate of the Nation, APC challenges PDP on plots to derail 2023 elections. INEC admits seeming overvoting in Osun states. Yeah, that's for the Nation.
The Daily Sun. The Central Bank of Nigeria bows to pressure, increases withdrawal limit. Individual now 500,000 naira weekly. Corporate is 5 million naira. And of course, this comes into effect next year on the 9th of January. NSCDC uncovers plot to attack INEC facilities that put state commandants on alert. The Inspector General of Police has declared war on gunmen in the southeast, and reps proposed 4 years jail term and 2 million naira for offenders of female genital mutilation.
All right, on the international scene, the very interesting stories that stand out. Biden greets Zelensky at White House. He went there. Independent. Biden greets Zelensky at White House. NHS faces worst days ahead after strike chaos.
The Financial Times, there's a picture there of President Joe Biden and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, his first visit, international trip outside Ukraine since the war began in February. In Washington, foreign sortie for Zelensky. The U.S. president has announced a fresh $1.85 billion in military aid, including these Patriot missile defense systems.
All right, iPaper looks like this thing with the health system is dovetailing into next year. NHS turmoil the last days with bigger strikes in the new year, 2023.
And the Daily Telegraph, NHS to be offered new pay deal to end strikes. So the workers will receive fast-tracked rise next year as the government tries to break the deadlock. And President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Joe Biden in Washington, D.C. And for the press preview, let's bring in Emmanuel Bello. We're looking at this day. Emefiele, British Parliamentarian, seeks independent institutions ahead of 2023 elections. Emmanuel, this comment is coming as the governor of the central bank is mired in controversy, but the CBN has now walked back its early decision on early cashless policy, on withdrawal limits.
Well, yeah, and it's you know, this the story on that. They did not just leave it at the U-turn or the policy somersault or the turnaround of the CBN and Emefiele, but has actually widened the story, giving it another perspective altogether, which I guess is, you know, it's building on the story instead of just all the papers are running with the turnaround, the change in policy and how it's going to affect everyone. But what this day is doing is actually expanding on an earlier story, which is, I think, is bigger, and that is the crisis of Emefiele as a person and also the CBN as an institution. The issue of control, the issue of those attacks on Emefiele, that accusation that he's funding terrorism. So this is the story focus on the support he's getting now from various groups, various institutions, even down to the British Parliament. I mean, it doesn't get stronger than that. It means that what is happening back home here is resonating around the world, especially the financial world, and very, very important people weighing on it and saying that, well, the central bank governor shouldn't become a victim of maybe a policy that is meant to rectify things. So, this is a good story for him. He's getting serious support, even governments now, the international community weighing on this and saying that he's first as a person, his freedoms, and then of course must be respected. And then the CBN as an institution, Kennedy, has been a long debate around this issue, people wondering what is happening with Emefiele. Emefiele has actually been in the center of a lot of story. Remember that there was talk about him running for the presidency, which that didn't happen. He's been tied to the politics of the country, and a lot of people think that his current travail are even tied to the politics of what has happened. So I remember a governor was saying, the governor of Adamawa State was saying, are they being punished because of his personal ambition that didn't go through, when it was so clear that the redesigning of the Naira and even the sucking out of money, lose money from the system, was targeting vote buying, targeting politicians particularly. So when recently there were these attacks on Emefiele, a lot of people just said, look, it's just witch hunt, it's just politics, politicians trying to do this. A lot of strong voices in the country also say that, Kenneth, that look, Emefiele is just victim of politicians, people just wanting to deal with him because of a policy that we rectify and change things. He has a lot of supporters who think that, yes, it's good to take out all those bullion vans from this election, take away the cash from it and make it a cashless kind of election where people can vote without anybody buying their conscience or buying their franchise. So, well, that is what people, those who are his fans and a majority of people say that. But there are other people too who say, look, if the DSS has said that, look, Emefiele has got questions to answer. DSS is a very thorough institution, and that it must have done its due diligence, and that we shouldn't just gloss over everything. Well, that is still there, but now you have world powers even saying that, look, we have the independence and the sanctity of the CBN as an institution must be respected, and that it shouldn't be, it should be, those kind of attacks shouldn't happen. There are people also have wondered why the DSS, and Emefiele, all working in the same government, could have this kind of dissonance and this, disconnect in terms of policy. But I think it's all part of that, that we have all these stories now. he wouldn't have, Emefiele can't appear today before our own parliament here because he's on a sick leave. I guess most of these things must have gotten him sick himself, but he's out there, and his deputy, he said, will be representing him to answer some of these questions. But the good news this morning is that for those like Indy maybe who need more cash in their pockets, this policy is going to help. There's a tweaking of the policy so that more monies will be withdrawn. You can have up to 500,000 a week if you're an individual, and then of course $1 million for corporate organization. For some people, it's good news. For many other people, they will say, well, it's business as usual. It doesn't really, the first policy didn't really matter to them.
Well, and some others are saying that maybe Emefiele is trying to get back at politicians because himself tried to get to the Plum office and then he didn't succeed. Well, those are talks, and then I'm wondering why the foreign countries are bothered about the countries that are being bothered about their own country. Well, let's look at let's look at some of the stories. I think someone said let them mind their business.
It's a global village. You know, the way Nigeria goes, so goes the rest of the continent, and I think that's what at the continental level.
All right,
I think they worry about what happened to Nigeria.
Some stories on the Punch. Depots dry up. Nigerian face bleak Christmas. I mean, there are some riders there, for example. I keep wondering, Emmanuel, fuel queues worsening in Lagos, because I thought that Lagos was the place from where other states get fuel. How come queues are in Lagos? Others marketers blame supply shortage. Interstate commercial drivers, passengers bemoan high cost of fuel and fares. Lagos test train project, 230,000 passengers daily, and then down the Punch, PDP, APC clash over alleged Tinubu rigging plot. All right, these are some of the things you want to look at from the Punch. Of course, you've talked about Emefiele's 500 increase on the cash withdrawals for the week. Let's look at those stories.
Well, these are very strong stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper. Of course, Lagos getting a very good historic headline there with that.
In fact, before you continue, I'm not interrupting.
Yes.
You. Somebody told me yesterday in Lagos they were paying 1,000 naira from Sele to where the person was going to, or from one place to Sele, 1,000 naira.
How much was it before now?
Before, something you should pay about 200 or 300 or something.
I think Lagos has always had this unique crisis with traffic and all of that. I mean, all sort of hold-ups in the country or traffic gridlock are always Lagos becomes a reference point for it and say this is the Lagosification of our streets, whether it's in Abuja or elsewhere. They look at but there's always been an attempt at traffic management, and the real this new technology of transport, 230 people yesterday making the trip, and that is going to, maybe this is going to reduce the burden. But you tie down India with the crisis of fueling, like you're saying, the dry depot. I think in one of the paper, Punch, actually saying there's a bleak. It's going to be bleak Christmas. First, it's going to be a cashless Christmas, and now it's going to be a fuelless Christmas, because you're going to have fuel and all of that, and everything comes to to a head in the festive period where you have a lot of massive movement. I think Lagosians will begin to enjoy the impact of the Blu-ray probably next year. But for now, the majority of people still depend on, what you just said, those high costs of just making the basic transport. I was in Lagos to myself last weekend, and I couldn't help but wonder at how Lagosians go through the crisis of trying to pay heavily for just interstate within just the Lagos. It's such a horrible thing. I think here the fuel crisis is not. On my way here this morning, I tried to check out, see whether there's a filling station not too far from here where I actually gauge the pulse of the oil economy of Nigeria, as far as I'm concerned. So, but it's like it's a bit lighter there, and people are getting the supply. But Lagos seems to be taking a hit as far as fuel. Right. The problem is that you don't seem to understand what's going on. Is it the supply chain issue? Is it marketers?
Is it NNPC has enough fuel?
Exactly. You hear that all the time. You get that kind of reassurances. The other day, the DSS even have to weigh in. It was as if it's it's espionage now at work. It's as if it's terrorism. But we saw that story, so we thought things would change radically. But for Abuja, I think it's a bit eased off, and I don't know. Maybe we have to follow more on this story to see what's happening this season around states and capitals, especially with the problem of fuel.
Well, that's the press preview this morning. Thank you so much, Emmanuel Bello. Let's hear your views on all the burning issues. Follow us on Twitter @AriseTV. You can join today's conversation using the hashtag AriseDaybreak.